Hi, my name is Peter Hinssen, and I'm really pleased to be here and to be invited to do a keynote by the Sunday Times Top 100 companies in South Africa. I wish I could have been there in person, but with travel and COVID and restrictions being what they are, not so easy. But I do have to say I'm really pleased that BCX is the top sponsor of this event. And the reason being is that I think we're probably kindred spirits. I mean, I am a technologist at heart. I always look at the world through a lens of technology, and I really believe that technology has the potential to really build a better future. I really believe that technology has tremendous leverage potential. And that's exactly what I want to talk about in a world that is changing faster than ever before, a world that I started calling the never normal. Now, this is a play on words on a book that I wrote exactly 10 years ago, which was called The New Normal. And it talked about the world of technology, the world of innovation, the world of digital. And what I predicted 10 years ago is that digital would just stop being special and become normal. And it wasn't the case in the past. I love this illustration. This is an advertisement dating back from 1980 when I was a young boy. And it was in an advertisement that my father had. And I actually still remember that. I actually framed it and it hangs in my office. And it was advertising a 10 megabyte hard disk for the wonderful price of $3,495 US. You can probably imagine what a fortune that was way back then. But 10 megabytes, I mean, every picture you take with your smartphone today is more than that entire hard disk. And the problem often isn't technology. The problem is actually users. I mean, I love this little video that shows that in the past, users didn't know how to use technology. They were often afraid to use technology. And when they tried to use technology, it often had disastrous consequences as a result. Now, I mean, we can be sorry for the guy, but that was really the old normal. But we now live in the new normal. A new normal where we've seen an S-curve like this, where in the beginning technology is special, and then it actually transitions into something that is just absolutely normal. I love this illustration back in 2016 in the US presidential elections when everybody wanted to take a selfie with Hillary Clinton. But in 2020, the Democratic convention was actually a digital-only, a virtual, online-only event. And then you have to say, thank God we had the new normal in that very strange episode of the last 18 months. Something that seemed so far away and strange and distant changed all of our lives. And I'm a bit of a sci-fi enthusiast. It really reminded me of one of my favorite sci-fi movies of the last century, The Day the Earth Stood Still. And what we encountered really wasn't a day, wasn't a week, wasn't a quarter. It was almost more than a year that we saw things and scenes that we never thought we would ever see in our lifetime. And it was a collective displacement. It happened almost simultaneously all over the world, in the US, in Africa, in Asia, in Europe. And for almost every organization, it was a little bit of a stress test. After 10 years of digital becoming normal, we had to figure out if we could still survive in a world where technology really was our only option. I don't know how you survived lockdown, but in our house with 2 teenage kids, there was a perfect correlation between the quality of the Wi-Fi signal in our house and my appreciation as a father. If there was just a tiny little hiccup in their YouTube or TikTok stream, they openly started to question at the dinner table if I ever got a degree in computer science. And it wasn't just lockdown. In almost every exit scenario, we saw that technology was playing an ever-increasing role into our lives. I love this example of a robot dog in Singapore patrolling a park to see if people were actually respecting social distancing. Who could have imagined that just 18 months ago? But we now live in a world where digital is normal. Most companies pass the stress test. But what is fascinating is that many companies started to realize that digital technology innovation wasn't just a cherry on the cake, it can actually be a big part of the cake. As we're now in a situation where we probably see the end of the tunnel, I think we have a little bit of a red pill, blue pill moment here. Some people get excited about the new normal and the next new normal, and some people are really getting a little homesick for the old normal. especially now in this BC AC changeover before and after Corona. The vaccines are starting to kick in all around the world, and some people are really homesick for the old normal. Well, first of all, it might take a little longer than we think. And second of all, the most fundamental question is, does the old normal actually exist? And that's why I'm fascinated by these S-curves. I had a chance to study with Carlota Perez, one of the greatest economic thinkers of our times, an amazing Argentinian economist who wrote a brilliant book called Technological Revolutions in Financial Capital. And she describes these S-curves in great detail. And she says this is nothing new. I mean, we've seen this over and over again, whether this is the Industrial Revolution or steam and railways or mass production or now information technology. It's the same type of S-curve. Something is strange, we don't understand it, then it really starts to take off, and then it becomes normal. But these cycles used to take 20, 30 years to materialize. The big difference is we're used to change, but it's now happening at a faster and faster pace. And that means that we can actually see some radical changes, disruption, if you will. And that brings me to my second favorite economist in the world. I didn't have a chance to study with him because he's long dead. But Joseph Schumpeter was an Austrian economist who was kind of a strange guy. He wanted to be the most influential economist in the world. He wanted to be the greatest horseman in Austria, and he wanted to be the greatest lover in Vienna. And on his deathbed, he lamented the fact that he could only realize 2 of his life goals because there were a lot of great horsemen in Austria, according to him. But he's the one who came up with the concept of creative destruction. When we see that disruption is bringing us something new, but we don't really know how to position it vis-a-vis the old. And that's why I get excited, because if you ask me what the next new normal is going to be, I think it's a combination of things, a combination of a number of shocks. Look at the world of technology. It's not because digital is normal that it's done, far from it. We're going to see a combination of new technologies. Look at things like virtual augmented reality, the real power of analytics and big data, the advent of artificial intelligence and massive automation. That is a powerful cocktail, which in the next decade is going to give us even more technological seismic shocks. But that's not it. We're in the middle of a biological seismic shock that is clearly far from over. But think about the big concern. Before the pandemic, it was the environment. Think about ecological seismic shocks. This is a scene from Blade Runner 2049. Love the movie. Look at the orange sky. But this is San Francisco last summer after the forest fires. Many of my friends who lived there sent me pictures like this. What a strange year we've had. In the beginning, we had Texas freezing over, collapsing the power grid in one of the most important states in the United States with total, devastating economic and personal consequences. A little bit later in the US, we had record-breaking heat waves that were unseen. And I live in Europe, where we've had massive flooding over this summer. So I believe that these ecological seismic shocks might be something that we have to take into account and remember the public discontent about that. That public discontent may be something that we have to take even more seriously. Think about even social seismic shocks. And then if you look at the bigger picture, the geopolitics, I would probably say we've never been in a more unstable period over the last 70 years. And we saw a very strange example of that just very, very recently. But fundamentally, what we've seen is that the trade war between the US and China has now escalated into a full-blown technological Cold War. The world is polarizing in a technology stack that is a Western technology stack and an Eastern technology stack. And if you're in Africa or I'm in Europe, we're smack in the middle of that. The world isn't getting more orderly, it's getting more disorderly. And I think that we shouldn't be afraid of that. On the contrary, I think this is a tremendous opportunity to see the advantages of that. Because every single one of those seismic shocks actually triggers things. It sets things in motion. It creates systemic shifts. Look at consumer behavior. This was already greatly altered as a result of digital becoming normal. We can now observe and analyze consumers better than ever before. And then COVID came along and just accelerated the acceleration in consumer behavior. Same thing in work dynamics. But more fundamentally, the way we make money, our business and operating models will probably be more volatile going forward. Same with capacity and resources. How many people and resources do we need to implement our strategy? But also opportunities to maybe fundamentally rethink the environment and sustainability. So I get excited by this. But it will be incredibly foolish to hope that we're going to go back to the old normal. As a matter of fact, I think we're getting into the never normal. A strange world. A world where little things can have huge global consequences, whether that is in the physical world or in the financial world. The last couple of years, it was fashionable to talk about these 4 words, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. I don't like these words, but it would be incredibly naive to hope that we're going to go back to a world of stability, uncertainty, simplicity, and clarity. The man passed away this summer, but he was the one who immortalized the concept of the unknown unknowns. And that's exactly what we're getting into, a world of constant change and opportunity, which I call the never normal. So let's dig a little deeper into that. What are some of the characteristics? There's 4 I want to mention: nonlinear, superfluid, hyperconnected, and ultra-speed. So what does that mean? When you look at the fluidity that we now see in society, in business, I mean, the pandemic was a really good way to illustrate that. All of a sudden, many people had to work remotely or work from home. If we went back to the office, it wasn't the same, and Lord, it wasn't easy. I love this Fisher-Price work-from-home playset, including video conference material, crying babies, and wine bottles. Well, maybe it wasn't that bad, but it wasn't easy. And it was part of how a society would deal with this bubble economy all of a sudden. This is the Berliner Philharmonic. Try to be profitable in a setting like this. But I love this Dutch example where Dutch restaurant owners put greenhouses in front of their restaurants for people to enjoy a corona-proof meal. And that shows the creative agility. And I think Hawking nailed it when he says, intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. And that's what we'll need in an increasingly fluid society. The second characteristic is we probably should look outside of our normal field of vision. I mean, linear just isn't enough. Just before the pandemic, we had Sony that makes televisions that says, we're going to build a car. How difficult can it be? A car is just a bunch of connected screens on 4 wheels. This is a TV company that is building a car. And at the same time, Toyota, a car manufacturer, said, we're building this new city in Japan called the Woven City, our vision of mobility of the future, and cars don't even function. I mean, how crazy is that? Look at the world of technology. Amazon, that I still remember as, an online platform to sell books and CDs, is now the biggest cloud provider in the world of technology. My favorite example is in China. I mean, Ping An, the largest insurance company in China, is reinventing itself in healthcare and even mobile healthcare. Nobody stays in their swimming lane. And that means that we have to be open for that connectivity because, as a third characteristic, we don't live in a digital age. We live in an age of networks. We live in a hyper-connected world where everything is connected to everything. And if we can capture the value of that information that flows onto the networks, we can really leverage the potential of the never normal. The fourth is that this means that the world is actually moving faster than ever before, and the pandemic was a pretty good way to illustrate that. We had winners and losers, as we'll probably see in the top 100 as well. But what is fascinating here is that it was really, as Dickens would say, the best of times and the worst of times at the same time. This is the craziest economic graph of the pandemic. This is the market value of Zoom compared to the market value of 7 of the largest airlines added up. How incredibly crazy is that? Zoom was worth more than 7 of the largest airlines added up. And the reason is very simple. We stopped flying. This is in Europe, air patterns in 2019 and 2020. And if we stop flying, we see the ripple effect of a connected economy. We stop flying, we don't need as many planes, so Airbus scraps 15,000 jobs. They order less engines, well, Rolls-Royce has to scrap 9,000 jobs. We stop flying, we don't need rental cars, Hertz goes out of business. But then we saw the best of times. We massively started to shop online. It was a true acceleration of sorts, an enormous shift in consumer behavior, an enormous boost in e-commerce, and an enormous boost in logistics. And there you see the characteristics of that never normal playing out. Non-linear, superfluid, hyper-connected, and ultra-speed. And I get excited by that. But I'm sure that you're thinking, but what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my organization? What does it mean for my company? What does it mean for my employees? And I believe this is something that we fundamentally have to understand. If you look at the world that is increasingly non-linear, we're going to need a flux mindset to be open-minded to pick up the ideas. In a world that is moving faster than ever before, it means that the skills we have are actually, their shelf life is getting shorter and shorter. And it means as a company that the reskilling we have to do of our employees is probably going to have to really increase. In a world where digital became normal and it's a networked, hyper-connected world, maybe we have to think about skills beyond digital. And what it really means is we're going to have to be ultra flexible and adaptable. Now, as I said, I get excited about this. But the big question for you is, when do you have to actually take it seriously? When do you have to move? And I'm not going to bore you with too much theory on this wonderful occasion, but just this one, the theory of optionality. This is the cycle of life. Whatever you do, a product, a company, a brand, life itself, it follows this pattern. You start, you grow, you peak, you decline, and then it's over. And we all know that if you wait until the very last moment to think about what's next, well, that's too late. Actually, even when you're going down, that's not going to help you anymore. And I would argue that in the old normal, you could wait until you're at your peak to reinvent yourself. Now you have to start thinking about reinvention the moment that you're doing very well. Nothing new. Peter Drucker said it a long time ago. The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, but to act with yesterday's logic. So you have to think, if we're going to enter a decade of the never normal with more technology disruption, more changes in consumer behavior, more volatility in markets, and more volatility in operating models, how are you going to cope with this? How are you going to organize yourselves for the never normal? Now, I get excited by technology, but I do have to say there is a gap between what is real and what is possible. I was in Denmark a while ago. This is a picture from a Lego factory. I mean, if you pick up a box of Legos in a toy store, you're the first human hands to touch it. Everything is automated. But maybe our hype of automation has gone too far. The last couple of years, it was autonomous this, autonomous that, self-driving this. Even John Deere said putting a farmer on a tractor, how incredibly old school is that? But I don't drive a self-driving car. As a matter of fact, I think there's a hangover effect. I love what Peter Thiel said. We wanted flying cars and we got 140 characters. When Google DeepMind, the AI of Google, beat the best Go player 5 years ago, I thought, wow, that's it. This changes everything. But we've all had it in the last 18 months. You look for something online, you find a product you want, you buy it, it gets delivered to your house, and for the next 3 weeks you get advertisements for the stuff you already bought. That's not artificial intelligence, that's colossal stupidity. Every conference we went to before the pandemic, we saw the famous Boston Dynamics robots doing all sorts of tricks and parkours and even dancing. But this is the latest version of Boston Dynamics. It's not dancing anymore, it's stacking boxes. And I think that's the techno-realism we're going to need in the never normal. I mean, maybe we have to put even more premium on the human element. The pandemic deprived us from a lot of things that we liked. We put on a brave face in front of our Zoom and team meetings, but the reality is that some of our lives were pretty messed up at a certain moment in time. Even the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, said, too much screen time, probably not good for your mental health. So how are we going to rebalance post-pandemic that work and life? Because I really believe the never normal is going to hit us. But how do we take that and at the same time focus on the human, with our customers, with our employees? How do we balance that? And make no mistake, we're going to have a wild ride. We're going to see what I call Hemingway patterns. Hemingway is a curious story because he was the most famous writer of his time, but he actually went bankrupt. Hemingway was declared personal bankrupt. And when he went bankrupt, the journalist went up and said, Mr. Hemingway, how did you go bankrupt? And he said, well, in two ways. Gradually and then suddenly. Very, very slowly and then boom. And I think those are the Hemingway patterns of the never normal. And then you have to ask yourself, you as a company, you as a leader of an organization, how are you thinking about the future? And we saw that the pandemic actually showed us that many of the mechanisms just didn't work anymore. I mean, the budget 2020, what a joke that was. How can we reinvent ourselves for these roller coaster rides of the never normal? We're going to have to, on the one hand, focus on being robust, the ability to keep operating, even in times of difficulty. And you've all proven in the last 18 months you were doing that. But more important, we're going to have to show resilience. How can we bounce back and even bounce forward to really take advantage of these opportunities in that roller coaster ride? And that brings me to the very heart of the matter. I finished a book which was called The Phoenix and the Unicorn. And it talks about how traditional companies can reinvent themselves. Because the last 10 years, we spent a lot of time talking about the unicorns. Every conference you went to, it was Uber this and Airbnb. And you could see people thinking, that's really nice, but we're a mining company. We're not Airbnb. We're not Uber. Honestly, even those companies suffered in the pandemic. But I think after a decade of applauding the unicorns, it's now time for the phoenixes. I mean, the potential to transform traditional organizations. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are potential phoenixes. I mean, I looked at the top 100. Many of those companies are in traditional sectors, and I think capable of reinventing themselves. Look at the world of retail. Retail is being transformed in front of our very eyes, and not because of technology. Well, it's really because of consumers, and especially the next generation. The Atlantic talks about the touchscreen generation. This is my favorite Santa Claus letter of a young girl who writes, "Dear Santa, how are you? I'm good. Here is what I want for Christmas," and then the Amazon URL of what that child wants to have under the Christmas tree. And that's why Amazon is the big fat unicorn. But a couple of years ago, I had a chance to go to the other side. In the US, Walmart is the biggest traditional retailer, 2.5 million employees, and they're now head-to-head competing with Amazon. In the US, you can use this. It's the Walmart in-home shopping app. You buy something on the app, a Walmart associate comes to your house in 30 minutes, could unlock your door, smart garage door, and put the stuff inside. And what I love is a feature that if you need things to be refrigerated, they can actually stock your refrigerator for you, and you can follow everything on the app because there's a camera and connectivity. This is a company that is reinventing itself. And of course, the difficulty is it's a big boat to change. The number one challenge is not technology, but the number one challenge is actually people. Walmart is now retraining 1 million of its employees, reskilling 1 million employees to take advantage of that never normal. And that's why it's more difficult to do a phoenix than a unicorn, but it's ultimately more rewarding. So what is the secret recipe? The secret recipe is we need a keen eye on what I call the day after tomorrow. The day after tomorrow basically is an idea that if we want to keep reinventing ourselves, we're going to have to overcome that problem that we don't really understand what the never normal is. So think about this. You as a leader, how much time do you spend on today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow? Many people tell me, 70-20-10. Today is the hundreds of emails you get and the dozens of Zoom calls. Tomorrow is next year's budget. And then there's the day after tomorrow. New ideas, concepts, business models, technologies that could change the rule of the game. It's not often 70-20-10, but most companies it's 93-7-0. And the problem is value. Yes, today is important. Tomorrow even more so. But the day after tomorrow is crucial if you want to reinvent yourself for the never normal. Unfortunately, for some companies, this is not the full picture. Some of you even have that big, horrible red square with negative energy, which we label as the shit of yesterday. How can we rebalance what we do and focus more on the day after tomorrow and less on cleaning up the mess of the past? I love this wonderful painting by René Magritte, a famous Belgian surrealist painter. And he uses this metaphor of how can we interpret the day after tomorrow, the egg, and figure out what that bird is going to be. I get really excited by this. But if you want to be the number one in the top 100 next year, what do you have to do? Well, I honestly believe that there's 3 elements to think about. One is strategy. How do you build strategy for a world that is constantly changing? How do you build strategy for the never normal? Well, I believe the only way to do it is to be bold on the vision and then flexible on the details. I think that should be a guiding way to look at strategic thinking in a world that is increasingly volatile. 1 strategy, but 2 structure. You also have to organize for the never normal. Who in your company is picking up the signals of the day after tomorrow? Where do you experiment and reduce the sauce? I came up with the concept of the hourglass model, We all know what an hourglass looks like. The top of the hourglass, that's the wide lens that really is our sensors for the day after tomorrow. This is where we pick up the sensing of the day ever normal. And then we have to reduce the sauce. We have to experiment. This part is the sense and try. And then it falls into the bottom half of the hourglass. This is where we run and scale and focus on the bottom line. But think about this in your company. Who is actually responsible for the sense and try? And how do you make sure that it falls into the run and scale? How do you combine the 0 to 1 with the 1 to n? And of course, this makes a real reflection on us as human beings, on people. Some of you really like being a soldier. You love to work in the bottom part of the hourglass, but some people are artists. They see things that other people don't. How do you combine and structure the artist and the soldier in your organization? Strategy, structure, but maybe the most important is culture, mindset. I don't think it's a technology race, but I do believe that companies who have the right mindset, they're going to be the winners. I came up with something called vaccine. Well, the pandemic inspired me. It's an incorrectly spelled word, but the V is for velocity. The world's moving faster. We will have to move faster. I love this quote from Mario Andretti. If everything seems under control, you're just not going fast enough. For me, last year, it was that hospital in Wuhan being built in 10 days. 10 days! I honestly live in a country where we couldn't do that in 10 days. We couldn't do it in 10 months. It would take us 10 years. But the world is moving faster. But more important than raw speed is the A for agility. I love the analogy of the whitewater kayaker. I mean, if you look at it, the first time you see it, you think, I'm going to die. This is horrible. The water's going to kill me. The rocks are going to crush me. But if you actually learn how to leverage the power of the water, you can use the power of the water to actually become more agile and survive. Speed, agility, the C is for creativity. We will have to unlock the creative potential. And the reason is I, innovation. Innovation is no longer a luxury. It's product and market and service and probably even model innovation, maybe all at the same time. Look at Disney reinventing itself for the never normal in the last 18 months into a full-blown competitor to Netflix. The N is for networking. It's about realizing that this is not the digital age, but the age of networks, of ecosystems and platforms. But the most important is the last one. The E for experimentation. How do you build in the psychological safety in your companies to try and take risks? And I really believe that if you want to lower the cost, if you want to increase innovation, you're going to have to lower the cost of failure. You, unfortunately, as leaders, can't wait until the final HBR article and implement 7 steps. It's no longer just about lessons learned. It's about lessons learning. How can you reinvent yourself and take risks as you go along? And that brings me to my conclusion. In the end, technology and innovation, strategy, but it's about people. How do we think about skills and minds and hearts? Skill set? I honestly believe if you look at the never normal and what that means in terms of challenges, we're going to put reskilling at the top priority for any organization out there. But it's more than skills. It's mindset, maybe even more. How do we build an organization where people are passionately curious about the day after tomorrow, endlessly open-minded to discover what the day after tomorrow could be, forcefully resilient and vigorously creative? If we do want to interpret the egg and figure out what that bird is going to be. Skill set, mindset, but in the end, heart set. How do we convince a next generation to join us if we can't be vocal about what we stand for and what we want to achieve? Skills, minds, and hearts. I think it's the only way to reinvent ourselves and become a phoenix for the never normal. The good thing is, you can still do something about it. And I get truly inspired by that never normal. But I'm sure maybe some of you or some of your colleagues might still be a little hesitant. Maybe you don't see the real advantages of all these wonderful new opportunities that are out there. But I do believe the timing is now, and we are going to have to turn this all the way up to 11. I fundamentally believe the future is already here. We just have to discover it. And if you want to reinvent yourself, let me end with my favorite quote from Maya Angelou. If you're always trying to be normal, you will never know how truly amazing you can be. It was wonderful to spend some time with you. Congratulations to everyone on the top 100. And of course, congratulations to the winners. I really enjoyed spending some time with you. And I really wish you the very, very best in the never normal.